Hello and welcome to TidyX episode 38. TidyX is a screencast where we go through and explain how our code works. My name is Ellis Hughes. You can find me on Twitter at Ellis_Hughes.
And my name is Patrick Ward. You can find me on Twitter at OSPPatrick. And you can find both of us on Twitter at tidy_explained, or you can email us at tidy.explained@gmail.com. I feel underdressed. You have a tie on.
Well, as you can tell, I am feeling very professional right now in my sweater that has a tie on it.
Yeah,
yes.
it's a built-in tie.
And a hood. There you go.
Oh, nice.
There we go.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's ugly Christmas sweater season. I
love that.
It's now after Thanksgiving, so we can do this, and I'm going to be wearing these basically every day for the next month. It's going to be wonderful, and I'm going to be so cozy.
Good. Nice.
And what I could do is wear these on what we're going to be talking about this week, on a hike, because this week's data set is on Washington hikes. So some schlubs put together this data set. You may recognize this from episode 35, where we did plots on rectangles. So this is kind of like Tidyception right now. So Inception, because we came up with this data set for a Tidy Tuesday on IKEA furniture. And so I was like, they might be interested in this. Submitted it as a potential option, and then this week they used it for Tidy Tuesday. And so it was data that we scraped from the Washington Trails Association website, and we put it together in a nice RDS. Very, very minimal cleaning, I will say. Did not spend any time cleaning this up. It is more or less the raw data.
Pretty raw, yeah.
That you can get there, but I think it's then really good because data isn't always clean for folks. So it gave people, I think, the opportunity to kind of work through.
Yeah, gives you something to work with.
Some stuff rather than just the plotting, because sometimes that can get a little monotonous. And so now you got to work through this unique data format and structure as well as this. So, planned it out. And so there were a lot of really cool submissions this week. I was really excited to see the way everyone was going about doing it. We got tagged a few times in a couple of them to ask us to take a look at it. And so overall, I was very happy with what happened this past week.
Yeah.
A
lot of good activity around.
Yeah, and so the one that we've decided to go through and explain this week definitely looked like a fan favorite. It got pretty popular here. It's from Tobias Stalder, and it's his Radial plots image here, which I think looks really nice.
It's a very pretty plot.
I mean, you can look at it and you kind of I don't know, it just makes me happy. If a plot can just make you happy to look at. It's just very clean, it's well organized, it's got the explanation here at the top of what you're looking at. It's got a nice legend at the very bottom of the plot. I'm just enjoying it, and I think a lot of other people did as well. It's got 265 likes, which I think is the most I've seen on a Tidy Tuesday post.
Yeah, lots of retweets and some discussion around it.
Yeah, there's also lots of great discussion around this, and so I think we might discuss that a little bit later on. We reached out to Tobias and like, hey, mind if we talk about it in TidyX? And he's like, go for it.
Yeah.
So his code's available on GitHub at this link here. So this is his GitHub. So we pulled that down into my R session, and we're going to go through and explain it. So here we go. So this is Tobias's code. Alrighty. So first things first, he starts off with a little header here at the very top. Describing what he's working on, where the data came from, when he worked on it, and a nice little his URL to his personal website. That's pretty fun there. They have Tobias-Stalder.netlify.app. So go check out what he's been doing. So the next thing, which is what you see in most scripts here, is the library section. So he's bringing in tidyverse, explicitly bringing in string-r, which I don't believe you need to be doing because it is brought in with tidyverse, but just to make sure that it's being brought in, it's not a bad thing to do. Prismatic, which is actually a package I'd not heard of before, but people should start using this more.
Yeah, we're going to show you why it's pretty cool.
Why we like it. Then there's Cairo, which is used to help export nicer images. I think it comes with some device additions. Scales for scaling scales, and extra font for bringing some additional fonts, and then uses load fonts from extra font to make sure that you can access it on your computer. So we load that in there. Next, he loads in the data. He doesn't use TidyX. Breaking my heart. Breaking my heart. But loading that RDS using this URL function, which I think then it's like a hack to allow you to just use URLs in your paths. Otherwise, it's got to figure out how to download it, and sometimes these paths here or these functions don't have the ability to do that. So I think if you type in URL and around it, it helps you download the data that way. And I'd saved it as an RDS when I made it as opposed to a CSV because I had some nested lists in there, and you can't really do that with the CSV. So that's why it's an RDS. So this is the data set. It's a tibble where it's got the name of the hike, the location of the hike. Everything's in a character basically because there's a lot of extra information around this when we scraped it, and so I just left it as a character. There's the gain, so the altitude gain of the hike, high point of the hike, of the average reading that it received, the features, so the features of the hike itself, and the description of the hike. So we've got that, and so now he steps in here. Patrick, you want to take us through this?
Yep. So as Ellis said, it's pretty raw kind of data file. So there's a little bit of cleanup if you wanted to make it work. So the first thing that he's going to do is he wants to extract the actual region. So if we look at the tibble that we had in the console there for a second, we can see the location has a whole bunch of stuff. So it's usually like location followed by 2 hyphens and then some other bit of contextual information about exactly where the hike is occurring. So all he wants is that region part, so that first kind of part right before the dash dash. So if we go back to his code, he's got a little bit of code here. You can see he right assigns things. So just there's times where he right assigns and times where he's left assigns, like in the next line. So you just kind of got to get used to writing that. So in line 31 there, he's looking for the word, and from the hike $data location column, he wants the first element separated by the dash dash. So that's going to be his hike region, which he assigns to the column called region within his hike data. And then he is just going to turn it into a factor so that it has some sort of ordering to it, which is probably going to come in handy when he wants to go and plot this stuff and arrange it and organize it and things like that, because ggplot works with factors in that way. The next piece of manipulation is he wants to, as he commented out there, does a nice job of commenting out all of his steps for everybody. He wants to extract the miles, so he wants to make sure that those are numeric. So I think in the original data set it was something like 23 space MI, 24 space MI. So there was always a little descriptor actually. Oh, okay. So there was it is important to note here. You can see that it says like X amount of miles round trip, X amount of miles of trails. Sometimes it's not round trip, it's one trip. So it's important to just, one way, there you go. It's important to keep that in mind. He's just removing the numeric value from this column. And so that's making an assumption that every single hike within that region is expressing the total miles of that given hike, which might not always be the case. So if you were going to do this a little bit more explicitly, which I think actually we did in TidyX 35, you're going to need to also parse out the explanation that comes after the comma, defining whether it's round trip, one way, or total cumulative trails.
Yes.
But he extracts the number, so as numeric, he uses an sapply. We've used some of these base R functions before. He's taking the length data he is going to separate out the numeric value. He uses the little the double brackets there, and to do that, that's like what you, with these base functions like lapply, sapply, you have to use the that kind of bracket notation. It's a little bit, because it returns everything as a list, which is the so it uses that bracket notation, which is a little different than, I think you could probably do this with like a string R function, where you could just extract give me only the numbers, or maybe even like G sub, and then, you know, G sub anything that's A underscore Z will get rid of all of the letters and just keep the numbers, something like that.
You can also do something like
Parse integer or parse numeric, yeah.
Yeah, that should do it too. But that's still removing context as well. All it's doing is scraping out the numbers.
It's just giving you the numeric values, which is what he did here, and he assigns those to length num, which is a variable.
Boom, there we go. So yeah, so now he's extracted the region and the length of the hike. So now he's going to just do some minor manipulations, because as we created the data set, everything was saved as character. We didn't go through and clean up anything. So he's converting gain, which is the altitude gain of the hike, into a numeric value. He's converting the high point into a numeric value, and then gonna pronate. Oh, so okay. So now he's going to apply numeric value to each row, because each row represents a single hike. Yeah. So now he's just going to assign that. So that way he has a tracking number, basically, so that he can merge back into that. So now
he makes it all into a data frame.
Yeah. So now he converts it into a data frame, because it was a tibble before, and this can happen anywhere. Though tibbles inherit data frame methods, so you don't need to explicitly do this, but sometimes tibbles behave in a funny way, where you're like, no, I want to print everything. Stop stopping me from printing all of this. I want to see all of this. I know I do that. So yeah, he does that. Next, he's going to calculate the cumulative length and mean for each region. So this is the cumulative length of hikes for each region and the mean altitude gain. So he does takes that hike data set that we have. He's going to group by region. So now it's going to calculate everything by each region type. So like Eastern Washington, Cascades, each one of those, and going to sum the length num. So now he gets a cumulative length of hikes, and then mean gain is taking the mean of gain. Rather self-explanatory. And so this is calculated for each region, and then he goes through and rounds mean gain to have no digits. So now it's just like the flat integer value of it, and then does a right assignment to summary stats. So let's run that, and so now we end up with this sort of look here. So for each region, we have the total length and mean gain. And so then he also wants to calculate what are the total number of hikes that exist for each region. So again, does a group by and does a count. And that gives him the number of tracks per region, and then assigns that to track numbers, and then performs a left join. So this is now going to left join summary stats and track numbers by region. So what it's going to do is now it's going to use region to determine what values from track numbers. Oh, that helps if I run this.
Run it.
So now it's going to now add this value n to summary stats based on the region. So summary stats will now have a column named called n, and at Central Cascades it'll have 226, or North Cascades 301, South Cascades 193. Let's look at that and make sure that actually happened. Hey, there you go. So Central Cascades now has a column n with 226. What you also could have done up here is use the n function there, and that'll give you the length for the group.
Yeah, that'll just count every single row within your group by.
Yeah, so you could do that. I mean,
either way.
I'm guessing there might have been some other things you was looking at calculating that wasn't just by region. So that's all good. Alrighty, so now we've got that. So now we've got summary all, which has us all this information, and we're going to hop into some plotting. So, as we kind of alluded to earlier, there's this little function here from Prismatic. And so I'll run this, and Patrick, if you want to tell us what we're seeing here, so let me clear it out.
Yeah, so normally we would, normally when we do this, people define their hex codes of the colors that they were interested in using for their plot. And of course, we have no way of knowing what those hex codes correspond to until we actually run the plot. But with Prismatic, this, you feed it the actual hex codes and it spits out the types of colors that you want. So he's got this really nice kind of Neapolitan ice cream look.
Yeah.
The gray and the kind of pink and vanilla color.
Yeah, exactly. And these are so color table can also do that. Sorry, that's my package, color table.
But the colors look a little different with this.
Yeah, so I think it's the way that my package is interpreting those hex codes into EC codes are slightly different, I think.
Oh, okay, interesting. Well,
so it's
good
just
to know.
It's just how you're interpreting the colors and assigning the EC set there.
The other thing is, your text is in white and his is in black, which may also make the colors look slightly different. Okay, here we go. So maybe this will.
I think it's just that the way that my code is looking at it, it's coloring it slightly differently.
Yeah.
I don't know. We can look in the future. I can talk to this Prismatic author, see if we can join forces.
Yeah.
On that.
That's cool.
Anyway, sorry, that was a little distraction, but really the key thing that we want you to be pulling out from here, this is really awesome because you can see up front what colors you're intending on using in the rest of your plot, rather than going, I'm using hex code 6C5B7B. We're like, yes, that is definitely a color, I think. I don't know. Now you can actually see it. So I like that a lot. And now we are finally getting to the actual image that got generated that we were so excited about.
Yeah.
So now he takes the ggplot to start off the ggplot, throws in summary all, so that's the data that's going to be used throughout the entire plot. And he starts doing some pretty cool stuff here, just like off the get-go. He has these 4 geom H lines, so now these are going to draw horizontal lines. And so one thing you're going to have to keep in mind as you go through this is basically everything needs to be drawn horizontally, and at the very end you turn it into this radial plot with a function later on that we'll talk about. And so
the other thing I think to keep in mind is that ggplot does work in layering, right? So if he did these geom H lines at the end, they would effectively come out on top of the bars that we saw in the plot. So unless you set some alpha to the shading of the bars, but so it is important to remember that like ggplot does work in layering. So you want it, if you want something that's going to sit behind, make sure it sits behind. You'll see at the end he's going to lock this white circle in the middle so that everything doesn't start at 0, which makes it look kind of nice. And he's going to do that at the end because that's going to be plopped onto the top of the plot. Top layer.
Yeah. So basically these panel grids, the custom panel grid, he even has a comment there. It's going to be on. He wants that on the lower, on the last thing that everything else gets built up upon, and so that's a cool thing there. So now he adds a geom call, which is now going to be drawing the columns for the plot there. He's setting his aesthetics to be X is the region, but he's going to be reordering it by the length, so that way it's kind of growing as you go around the circle, the length. And then he does this really cool str wrap function within that, and so that's going to do is it's going to look at your strings, and anytime it's got a section that doesn't have white space in it longer than whatever you define it as, and here you defined it as 5, it's going to replace that white space with a /n, and that is important here. We can quickly take a peek at what this actually did under the hood.
Yeah, this is a super cool function that I've never seen or used before, but I'm going to use it a ton. It's
Yeah.
handy.
So it's like central cascades. Originally, it was central space cascades. Because central was more than 5 characters wide,
Yeah.
it's now put a carriage return, a /n, in there. And so this
Yeah.
is going to be important for the actual plot later on, because now it's not going to try to print central cascades in a full line. It's going to do central, return, cascades.
And it prevents you from having to do a theme axis text like 90 or 45. Now it'll keep it so that the person can read it head on, but just have a nice spacing to it.
Yes, exactly. So that's the x-axis. The y-axis is going to be the sum length, so that's the length of the hike, or the total length of the hikes, and he's going to fill by n. So n is the total number of hikes that exist in that the plot there. He's going to position by dodge 2, which is, I guess, a special dodging algorithm. I think Kara Wu might have talked about this at some point. Yeah, so it's using dodge 2. Show legend equals true because he wants to show the legend for coloring them with fill, and he's setting the alpha to be 0.9. So it's just like slightly opaque. Like you can kind of see a little bit of this stuff underneath it.
Yeah. Why don't we run everything to that point so we can see iteratively how this grows into. So there we see it on the horizontal. So it hasn't been flipped yet, which we'll do in a bit here at the end. We can see that the custom coloring hasn't been applied. The custom theming of the background hasn't been applied. You can see a little bit of the opaqueness, like the North Cascades. You can see it's a little bit see-through from the alpha being set. And you can also see that he hasn't done anything with the axis titles yet. So you can still see the X is assigned to reorder, string, wrap, region 5, sum length. But you can see the names aren't overlapping each other. It looks really cool. So that's where we're at right now. And let's keep going.
Yeah. Patrick, you want to take us through the next set?
Yep. So he's got a few comments here. He's going to new fill and legend title for the number of tracks per region. So this is where he's going to specify the coloring that he explicitly wants for the number of tracks. Okay, and then he's going to go on to the mean gain per region, and he wants to plot this as a geom point. So he's going to use this same reordering, string wrap, yada yada, to ensure that the points are specific to the region that has been set by the first geom call that he made. Here the y variable is going to be mean gain, and the size is 3, the color is gray, so a little bit of styling there. The one thing to keep in mind with this is that mean gain and total length are 2 different measurements. So I think, like, when I look at the plot, I see what's going on, and I can kind of look at it and make sense of it, but it is kind of hard for me to think about the relationship between those 2 variables because they are measured differently. So they're different quantities. So it's hard to understand the magnitudes there and what it actually is telling me. But it does make the plot look nice. So we have that. We have the mean gain. The next thing that he does is this lollipop shaft for the mean gain per region. It's not really a lollipop because he sets his y-end that you can see there all the way up to 3,000, which is the max or the near max value of the observed length, total length. So he uses geom segment, which is basically saying we want a segment of a straight line. He wants his line type to be dash, and he sets it in the starting at the x-axis of the same position that we started the geom call and the geom points from. The y-axis to be 0, so he wants it to start at the base of the plot, and then he wants the x to end at the same area where he started, right? So the x isn't going anywhere. It's not like going over time. It's basically within each region itself. And then he sets the y-end to be, like I said, 3,000. So instead of being a lollipop plot where the dashed line is going to end at the dot, it's going to extend all the way out and have the dot somewhere in the middle of it. So there we can see you sort of have like these bars behind these like jail bars with dots on them.
I mean, it's kind of, I mean, looking at it this way, at least I see kind of an immediate trend where like Issaquah Alps, on average, like you don't have a ton of trails, but they do have.
They're steep.
Yeah, fairly steep. And
I
then
think that's an interesting point, which we'll probably talk about later. Is sometimes something like this might be easier to visualize the magnitude of a change or the difference between groups or something like that, versus the radial plot where it's hard to have an appreciation for things like this when everything's on a circle.
Yeah.
But the radial plot is like way more fun to look at than this, so we'll kind of talk about that
we'll
a
talk
little
about
bit, because that was part of the discussion that came up on Twitter, actually.
Yeah, cool. So let's hop on to the next piece here. So now he's doing a lot of annotation, styling, and cleanup stuff. So because he created his custom, he has the two different things that he's measuring, the length and the mean elevation gain. He adds these annotations there to try to tell you, this is what this is measuring, this is what this is measuring. So he's adding annotate. So he's annotating the bars. He's going to put in, so this is the actual value he's going to be dropping in there, mean elevation gain, FASL, using the genome text. It's got this angle here that he's assigning, this color, this size, font family, and it's going to be plopped down at x equals 11 and y is 1300. So he's just plopping that right down there. Same idea here with cumulative length. And so I think we can, well, you'll see it in a bit here, but he's just like, I'm trying to tell you what's going on in these plots. What are the two things that he's building there?
Yeah, he only annotates one of those are only specific to one bar, with the idea that it's the same information for all of the bars.
Yeah.
He just annotates one, the largest one actually, so that you can have a sense for what you're looking at.
Yeah.
It helps orient you.
Exactly. Then adds annotations for the custom scale because he drew those horizontal. Right now they're horizontal lines. We haven't polarized it yet. He's adding the custom scale annotations for that, so 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000, so you know what those actually represent, because he's going to be removing all other styling later on. This is actually how he creates that little center circle, is by setting scale y continuous to the limits of negative 1,500 to 3,500. And so I think when we did radial plots originally, and this was like episode 3 or something, it was very early on.
It was like 2 or 3, and it was a shiny app to compare NBA players.
Yeah, so we didn't do this. So we allowed our plot's center point to represent the 0, and go out from
like
there.
A little.
So they kind of look like pizza slices a little bit.
Yeah.
And here, by setting the limits to be negative 1,500, I mean, if you want to do this your own, you're going to have to like play around with it a little bit. I don't know if there's like a hard and fast rule how to do this properly. Now it's going to push them all out to the by 1,500 essentially, and so now you're going to have this white circle, and so they're not going to look like pizza slices anymore. They're going to look more like just columns headed out, bars headed out. And so I thought that was really clever, and I commend him for that. Expand 0, 0, so it's not going to try to grow or like have little spaces around the limits there, and then he's going to set the breaks to be 0, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. So those are the breaks that he created originally, and so this is just so it gets plotted there. Adds all his labels for the plot, so the title, hiking locations in Washington, subtitle, and he's using these ends, so carriage returns there, to put the spacing in and make it look pretty inside of the plot there. The caption, of course, you got to recognize all this visualization was created by Tobias. He's sourcing us for the data, which is really Washington Trails Association. Thank you all for putting the data up there. I just scraped it.
Yeah.
And putting that all together.
Now the moment of truth. Here it is.
Moment of truth. Chord polar. That is all you got to do to turn this from a flat horizontal plot into a really cool looking polar plot,
Yep.
a radial plot. So now he adds a bunch of theming, select and position bottom. So now the legend is going to be at the very bottom. He's going to remove with element blank. So element blank tells ggplot, don't do this. Don't plot it. This element is blank. So remove the axis title, title ticks, text y. For axis text.x, he's setting the color to be 12 and the size to be, or the gray 12 and the size to be 12. So he's setting the aesthetics for how that's going to look like. The panel background is going to be white all the way around, both fill and color. The panel grid, get rid of that. I don't want that. Panel grid major X, don't want that either. That's not useful.
And this is because he set his own with the GLMH line.
Exactly. Setting any text that exists inside of his plot to be using gray 12 and using the font family Bell MT. The plot title, he's going to tell it to be bold, size of 25, and H just of 0.05. So it's like just marginally moved over. Plot subtitle, now it's going to be element text size of 14, H just of 0.05. So once again, just marginally moved over. So it's not, it's like 5% moved over essentially. Plot caption, font size. So it's like progressively getting smaller with the like how important you want people to be looking at it. And now he's got to set an H just of 0.5, so that'll center it in the plot there. And then he uses guides. And so I thought this was really cool because when I looked at his plot, I was like, wow, that legend looks really nice. And this is how he did it. He used guides, which is relatively new to ggplot, I think. Like I know it wasn't there when I first started using ggplot.
Really? Oh, I feel like it's like super old, actually. Maybe not.
I mean, or it was just like I didn't see the tutorials. I don't know. But he's using the guide color steps, which is from ggplot 2, and it's saying I want to have a guide for my color steps, and I want to style it such that the bar width is 15, the bar height is 0.5, so it's wide and skinny. The title is going to sit above it, and it's going to be centered. And so it's now going to draw the legend to be very, I mean, to me, I thought it looked really nice for this. And then he has his GG save here to his path, and using Cairo PNG from the Cairo package. But I don't want to save it at this point, so I have it commented out, so I can just run all his code. Boom, there we go.
Okay.
Let me zoom out, and let's do this. Because
that's it. That's a really cool.
Yeah, and so this is the
second plot.
The legend there with the guide color bars, and so they're skinny and wide with each break noted here. So I thought that looked pretty sweet here. The growing snail shell of cumulative miles. The visualization there. I mean, I think it's a pretty slick plot.
That's awesome.
And lots of information here that you can kind of start looking at and starting to understand. So thank you so much, Tobias, for letting us explain your code. We're thrilled that everyone else was so excited about this plot too, loving it or liking it, and share it. Definitely stay involved with Tidy Tuesday. And then folks, if there's a Tidy Tuesday post you want us to explain, tag us, and we'll just so that we don't see all the posts all the time. Like we try to keep a good eye out for everything, but tag us if there's something that you're interested in with at tidy_explained.
Yep.
And we keep track of those and kind of block those away for future episodes. But sweet, there you go. So once again, thank you so much, Tobias, for letting us go through and explain your code. So now we're kind of going to go off a little bit on a tangent. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can just hear us talk, because we're just going to talk for a little bit. How do I stop sharing? There we go. Let's prop that over. Alrighty. So one of the threads that kind of popped up from the Tobias's tweet was discussing more about visualization of information versus art, and explaining the two. And like there are cases where you want to favor one over the other, where how much information do you want to have in your plot for like decision making versus how much do you want to show the trend and information and get that information out. So there's two different things. They're kind of always, I mean, you occasionally can get a very pretty plot that also is very information dense and you can actually get the numbers out of it, but often it's kind of on this continuum between the two.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to open that conversation, Patrick, because I know you responded to that. So
Yeah, I'm trying to find the tweet. There was a guy that asked a question. Let me see if I can find it. He asked a question, or maybe it wasn't even a question, maybe more of a
statement.
Maybe more of a statement. Yeah, I mean, bit more of a statement. So, and it's sort of like a philosophical, kind of like a philosophical thing about plotting and charting and visuals. Oh well, I can't find it.
Oh.
Anyway, his statement was something to the effect of, was the plot just done to look nice, or was there some purpose that allowed you to draw meaning from this versus something that's simpler, like a bar, like we talked about with that bar plot or something like that.
because he was asking about why is there a specific value in making it radial,
Yes.
or do you want to, like, what's the value of doing this?
Exactly. And so that's kind of what you're alluding to, and kind of what I alluded to with the flat bar plot. When if you were a person maybe reading like a Washington Trails Association magazine, a really dry bar plot or a density plot or a box plot or something, it's probably not super exciting to draw you in, right? And that's why, like, when you read things like really good magazines or like good science magazines, Scientific American, National Geographic, the visuals, they have people that there's literally
New
people
York Times,
PhDs.
New York Times, 538, like
538 is really nice. There's people who have like PhDs in data visualization and how to tell a story. And for the it depends on who your audience is, right? For the end user, if it's Joe Public who's trying to just like gather information, telling that story in a visually appealing way, provided that you're not masking reality and doing creating
you're not lying with the data.
Yeah, lying or doing something deceitful. That can be a really compelling way for people to interact with the story versus just reading words on a page or looking at a really bland plot. Now the flip side of that is in science, like both of us have worked in science, and at the end of the day, like sometimes if we're building a visualization, it's because there's an end goal of decision making, or there's a goal of exploring the data in a way that allows us to draw some observational inference, which may help us gain insight into what kind of analysis we might do, or perhaps even gain insight into maybe a different methodological approach for a study or something like that. Like, oh, this is really interesting. This group over here totally behaves, in a different way.
They're like, if you're clustering and you're able to go, like look at it, and like one group is just totally separated from the other, like that, you're trying to draw like actual hard information out of that, so you can use that to then derive decision making. Or like a lot of the time I'm creating like box plots comparing responders versus not responders, and the various levels of the thing we're measuring. And so we're using a lot of box plots, we're using a lot of scatter plots, but we're really trying to understand like what's going on, so we can drive decision making versus trying to see I don't want to say see trends, because we're seeing trends with those too, but it's more about information transfer than it is about getting people excited and interested.
Right. And so I think that's the key thing. As I think Tidy Tuesday, if you scroll through Twitter, you see lots of like just people who do things with data viz that like I would never even think to do. Like they're almost like graphic designers, where I'm like, wow, that is like absolutely amazing. Like I would never think to do that. And I'm generally happy with like a density plot and a scatter plot. I'm like, oh, this is
all about like what we are used to doing, and what like what works for us, which is why I love Tidy Tuesday, is the fact that so many people are able to take the same data set and see different things out of it. And then like Georgios and Cedric,
amazing.
They make amazing plots, and they're just doing stuff way out of left field that I would never have thought of doing.
Exactly.
And so there's a lot of information in there. Like they kind of ride the line between the two a lot, I think. It's a lot of information in there, but it's also very pretty.
Right, and we talked actually with David Robinson on a TidyX about this, and because he makes like nice plots, but a lot of times it's like, oh, let's do a geom column to count groups, and let's do it's stuff that he's using to derive information. I think the way that he put it is, I'm trying to do this stuff in order for me to extract as much information from the data set as possible within an hour.
Yeah. And
so his goal for plotting isn't to create something that's going to go into the New York Times. It's to be like, okay, this looks like this looks like this. Okay, let's try and analyze it like this and just go. Right. So I thought Tobias's plot was kind of a cool one that walks the line between something that we might draw information from, and it might guide us to ask more questions about hiking in a certain area, as well as being like nice and visually appealing, and something, there was like a weird bot that like locked onto his tweet and was like, for more on hiking trails, and then I kind of tongue-in-cheek replied after looking at their site quickly, like, maybe you can hire Tobias to do some graphic design for your users to interact with, things like that. So I do think it was a nice plot. It conveyed information that people would want, and it did it in a very clean and more exciting way than your standard kind of. You
could just do a box plot or a scatter plot, but this way, like, people could go, oh, I see that there's a lot of really long there's a lot of trails in this area because it's this color. I'm going to click on that, and you could make the plot like interactive. Click on that, and it could take you to a table or another visualization of just plots in that region, and then you'd show it in a different way, trying to show them, okay, now you're wanting to look at what features does this hike have versus altitude gain and length, or something like that. But
correct,
it's helping you. So Tobias made a really interesting plot of trying to balance the two, art versus information.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's an awesome job.
Yeah.
Really liked the plot. It seemed to be a big hit. There was lots of great visuals with the data that we had provided this week, and so it was, as it always is, it's tough to choose. But I felt like once he got over like 200 likes, I think it's hearts. It's not likes on Twitter. It's hearts, right? Once he got over 200, we were kind of like, this is probably the plot that we have to discuss. It seems like it's a consensus. The consensus fave.
Everyone's about it.
Yeah.
So sweet. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you for joining us for our little conversation about visualization and how to do it. I know tons of people have written a lot about this, but no more than us, about visual design. Klaus Wilkes, he does a bunch of great stuff. There's How Charts Lie. There's a bunch of really great stuff too.
Edward Tufte is like a famous one in DataViz. Stephen Few, who wrote Signal, is like, and a bunch of books on dashboard design. Stephen Few is a pretty popular one on data visualization and things like that. So those are some authors you could check out if that was kind of a topic that you were interested in.
Wanted to learn more about.
Yeah.
But sweet. All right, with that, I think we can call it. So, as always, thank you for joining us. My name is Ellis Hughes. You can find me on Twitter at Ellis_Hughes.
And I'm Patrick Ward. You can find me on Twitter at OSPPatrick. And you can hit us both up on Twitter with ideas or comments or questions at Tidy_explained. Or, if you don't want to do it publicly, you can email us your questions or comments or ideas, tidy.explained@gmail.com.
Alrighty, well, thank you so much for joining us, and keep on exploring your world.